I'm not ready for this. Hello everyone, I'm Father Aaron. Welcome to The Dungeon Minister. So this episode is all about what happens when the DM comes to the table with zero preparation. Zero. Zip. Nada. Zilch. Nothing. How did this happen? Well, I got busy. It was a busy time, there was a lot else going on, and, well, I was spending my nights making terrain, which you'll see in a subsequent video, instead of writing adventures. Mea culpa, mea maxima culpa. And, Sunday kind of snuck up on me, which is bad considering I'm a priest. But anyhow, I got to the day and I realized I didn't have anything really prepared. Now, part of this is because I had assumed in the previous adventure, the Revenge of the Kobolds.
You mean us?
Yeah, I mean you. In the Revenge of the Kobolds, I assumed they would play the adventure and then travel back to Honeywood, and that we'd be able to do that as one session. But the fight took longer than I thought it would.
Because we're tough.
Yeah, because you're tough. And I knew I had to get them from those caves down to Kilmarnock. And I had to get them down there because, as you'll recall, or maybe you won't, but anyway, Fofire had contracted lycanthropy. I mean, she hadn't contracted it, it had been foisted upon her by a werewolf, but anyhow, she had lycanthropy and it was slowly developing. From the time of her infection until its full realization, where it would be unstoppable and uncurable, was a month. And from the point of infection, she had about 2 weeks before the symptoms started emerging. Well, they're at 10 days at this point. So they have to get down to Kilmarnock at some point. They've got to get down there to see a high enough level cleric. Because a high level cleric, 11th level or higher, when they cast Cure Disease, it can cure lycanthropy. And neither of the clerics at Honeywood are anywhere near that level. So they've got to get down to Kilmarnock. All I had written was the character's journey back to Honeywood, or something along those lines. That was it. There was nothing else. It was supposed to be an addendum to an adventure. Maybe a random encounter along the way, nothing else. Yeah, well, so now it's got to be the whole session. Okay, well, so they've spent the night in the caves. They've kept a watch, they had a rotating watch during the night, and I did roll from Wandering Monsters for that, in case something came in. It's wintertime outside, or it's not supposed to be, but there's an ice age setting in. So it's cold out, it's snowy, maybe some critter comes in. Nothing disturbs them in the night, nothing comes in. I think I decided that, like a badger came looking for a warm place to stay. No problem, let the badger, share your bunk. No. They wake up the next morning, memorizing spells, of course, it's the same routine. Bob Johnny gets his 2 magic missiles and web, and Fleetwood gets sleep and light and web. That's the usual spell selection. They eat a morning meal. Now, food is getting very low. They have very little left. Everyone, when they set out, had 1 week of iron rations they had purchased to bring along. Fleetwood, who always thinks ahead, had 2 weeks' worth. So he's been able to share that out with his companions to help stretch it a little bit. They've also taken some food along the way. When they defeat something, when they've cleared out a layer of monsters, etc., including the kobold caves, the werewolf, etc., any food they find, they take. But this is now getting near to empty. They've got almost nothing left. And they know they have at least a day and a half left to get to the keep, and that's if they don't run into anything. Plus another day and a half down to Honeywood. So they've got about 3 days until they can get back to a place where there's food. There's not 3 days worth of food left. What are they going to do? So they decide they'll go fishing. They'll go fishing. They're on the edge of the Great Northern Sea. There's a beach right there with a pier that goes out into it. They'll go fishing. With what? I ask. Well, all you need is a stick and some string and a hook. I know this because I did it when I was a little kid. My mother and I were camping, and I just took a stick, and there was some old fishing line had gotten caught on the shoreline of the place where we were camping, and I found there was a hook attached, and I dug up some worms or something, and I went fishing, and I actually caught like 6 or 7 fish. So they know that it's possible, because I've told that story, and so they say, we'll fish. Okay, great. You can find sticks in the woods. What are you going to use for the string? What are you going to use for the line? Oh, well, they hem, they haw, and then they realize we'll chop off a section of rope and we'll, separate the fibers, and then we get some nice long, thin. Okay, great. Creative, well done. How about the hook? The hook. This stymies them for a little bit until, I think it's the middle guy says, how about the darts that the kobolds shot at us? Okay. They go and collect, because they had shot a number of darts, including the one that went into faux fire. They collect those up, they clean the poison off the ends very carefully, and bend them, use those for hooks. All right, so now you've got your gear. How about bait? Now, this troubles them for a little bit. They're back and forth about the bait. What are we going to use? Well, we could dig. No, it's cold enough that the worms are all deep down now. The ground isn't quite frozen. Again, it's not that cold yet. The snow is falling, but it's like snowfall in late November, right? It's cold, but it's not frozen solid. But the worms have all migrated down. They're not staying near the surface anymore. So what are you going to do for worms? Then my eldest saves the day. He's a huge reader, voracious reader. He'll plow through a book in a couple of hours. He reads like nothing else. And he has read the book, My Side of the Mountain. Favorite book when I was a kid. I loved that book, and I gave it to him to read. And he remembers that the main character, Sam Gribley, when he was looking for bait for fishing, couldn't find worms, but knocked apart an old rotten log and found grubs, because grubs overwinter in rotten wood. So they go into the forest, and it's a natural forest. It's not maintained or anything, so there's tree fall and logs rotting here and there. They find one, they knock it apart, and sure enough, grubs. Now, there are no rules in BECMI about fishing. There's nothing in that book that says anything about fishing, but that's one of the beauties of these things. That's why I love the old school rules so much. There's very light on rules, and the DM just makes it up, right? The DM and the players just solve it on the fly. So that's what we did. We figured it out as we went. I decided on a percentage, right? Like if you roll this or better, you're going to catch something. And so they start rolling percentages. At first, it wasn't going very well. They weren't catching anything. But here's the thing about fishing, right? It's not like other skill checks in D&D. You can fish all day. People do, right? So they just kept fishing till they caught something. So it took a few tries, right? A few casts, and they, some of them went to different areas along the shoreline and whatnot. But eventually, they started catching fish, and once they had 5 or 6 of them, they knocked off for the day. What this did is it put their departure more like 10:30, 11 o'clock rather than the break of dawn, which is normally when they take off, but fine. They brought their fishing poles with them because they figured they could use them again, and set off on the trail. Now, the trail they're using is the one that connects the caves that the kobolds and gnolls had been living in down to the keep. As they go, I'm rolling wandering monsters, but just nothing's coming up. The dice are saying, nope, quiet day on the trail. So they don't have any real problems. Squirrels and rabbits and stuff. Eventually, the sun starts to set and they need to find a place to camp. It's starting to get, it's still light out, but it's starting to get dark, and they need to find a place to camp. Well, where are you going to look? You could camp here on the trail. Yeah, they don't want to camp on the trail, right? Monsters and animals use this. They don't want to be in the traffic pattern if something comes along. Okay, where you want to look? Well, let's look toward the northern sea. Let's look in that direction, to the east of the trail. All right, you look that way. There's not really a lot, This trail, it sometimes gets very close to the sea. It sometimes goes further inland. It generally, though, cleaves to the shoreline. And there's not a lot there until they get to the beach, where there's an area decent where you could camp. But they say, no, we don't want to camp on the beach. It's too exposed, first of all, to the weather. There's no shelter around. But also, it's visible. I mean, you light a campfire there, it can be seen for a long way along the shoreline. No, not going to camp there. Okay? So they try inland. They go further into the forest. Now, at this point, I say, they've been searching for a little while, and I say, well, you can see up ahead there's a clearing. Now, back me up on this. Clearings are a thing, right? Right? Like forests have clearings in them. A tree falls, it knocks some other trees over, and there's a space in the forest where there's a little bit of room, right? This happens, doesn't it? Thank you. So I'm thinking, yeah, there's a clearing. Okay, there's a clearing. Because frankly, I just wanted to get them bedded down and I wanted to stop faffing around in the woods. My eldest, for some reason, gets real suspicious. What's going on with this clearing? What's this clearing all about? Essentially, he thinks that I've done some preparatory work. I've done nothing. Nothing. So he thinks I've got some encounter planned in the woods. All right, I run with it. You can see the clearing up ahead, and now you begin to see the beginnings of a trail. Just faint. It's not a real clear-cut trail, but clearly something moves through here, back and forth, on the regular. It's worn a little bit more than anything else around you. Okay. Weapons out, they follow this trail. They eventually come to the clearing. And because they're so weirded out by it, I said, well, we'll run with it. The first thing you notice as you step into the clearing is that the trees are all evenly spaced in a perfect circle. A perfect circle of evenly spaced trees. The only break in the trees is in the path that you have just entered through. And the middle of the clearing is covered with lush grass. There is no snow on this grass. This freaks them right out. Like, now they're certain that something is going to happen, something's going to jump on them, something's going to kill them, there's a trap, there's some sort of magical vortex, I don't know. They are freaked out. But then the more they look around the place, they start to explore. The more I keep emphasizing that it's lush and green, and the trees around it are all conifers, so they wouldn't have dropped their leaves anyway, but they all seem perfectly safe and canny. There's nothing ominous about it, right? Okay. They decide we'll camp here. There's a debate, right? Like, no, this is clearly a magical evil place. And then the others say, no, it's clearly a magical good place. So it's back and forth, but they decide they're going to camp here. Partly because as they explore it and as they debate, the sun is getting lower and lower and lower. It's getting colder and colder and colder, and they need to start a fire. So they go off into the underbrush and they gather up some firewood, some dry wood. They pile it up and they make themselves a nice campfire. Now, they set watch. They're definitely going to set a watch. They always do, pretty much. They always set watch. So they're going to set a watch. And I'm real careful to ask, how do you arrange your camp? Well, they put the fire pretty much the center of that circle, which, having decided it was a little spooky, is an odd choice to go right to the center of the circle, but that's what they do. And they'll arrange their sleeping around it. Okay? I say, okay, who's on the first watch? And I can't remember who drew first watch, but someone draws first watch. And what do you do? Where are you on your watch? Well, I'm going to tend to the fire to keep it burning, and I'm going to stay close to the fire because it's warm. That's important, because if you've ever sat around a campfire at night, and if you haven't, what are you doing with your life? I mean, come on, go camping. Like now. I don't care that it's winter. Go camping. Anyhow, if you've sat around a campfire at night, you'll know that as you look at the fire, the rest of the campsite is plunged in darkness because your eyes are, looking into a fire, right? And what you can see is just the light playing on the trees around you. And it's a little spooky and eerie, and as the campfire flickers, the trees seem to move in the darkness. So this is happening. Now, it's the middle of the night, it's Touchberry's watch, and I ask, what are you doing? Well, I'm tending the fire, poking the fire, right? Like you do. As you do so, as you sit there in the dark, and the first watchman has gone back to sleep now, as you sit there, you hear something. In the underbrush around the clearing, beyond the trees, you hear a rustling and a moving, and it gets closer. And now it seems to be all around you, and in the firelight, the trees seem to be dancing and swaying. Immediately, he wakes everyone up. Get up, get up, get up, get up, get up! Something's happening, something's happening! As they wake up, the rustling and the swaying stop. So they wake up, and although the players know, because they're sitting at the same table, the players know, I tell them, your characters don't know what just happened. And so they wake up and like, what? And Touchberry's saying, there's noises all around us, and the trees are moving, they're swaying back and forth. And they're looking around, no, they're not. What are you talking about? He says, I tell you it happened. So fine, we'll investigate. Okay, fine, we'll investigate. Now, Remember, the elves have infravision, right? And the dwarf as well. Torek is still with them, if you haven't remembered. Poor Torek, he always he's tagging along. Anyway, they have infravision. So they can see somewhat in the dark, but infravision is a heat-cold thing. It's not, not being able to see things in shapes, it's things in temperatures. So it doesn't really do a great job of detecting flora. Flora has a heat signature, but not as much as fauna, right? And the presence of the fire really blows out that infravision. There's this really intense concentration of heat. So it's hard for them to see all of the details around them. So they take brands from the fire and start to search. As they go around the circle, they find something alarming. They're almost certain that the path was over there, that they came in this way and made camp. They're almost certain that's where the path was. But they find the break in the trees there. What? And they check, right? Well, my sleeping pad, I was sleeping over here with my back. That's where it was. Why is it over there? And they look all around. They find no creatures, nothing. The circle looks exactly the same, except the gap in the tree ring has moved from one side to the other. They are seriously freaked out. What is this place? What is going on? Right? They're all on edge. Is something going to attack them? Nothing. There's no creature. With the elves, with their infravision, scan through the forest. There is no living creature of any kind of size out there. Again, rabbits, right? Nothing. Okay. It was around time to change shifts anyway, so Fofire is going to take over, and Touchberry says, you watch. You watch that gap. Problem is, Fofire has no infravision, and as a human has kind of the worst eyesight out of the lot of them. All right, so she's going to watch. She's going to do her best, but she sees nothing. She sees nothing. She wakes up the next. It's one of the elves. I can't remember which one. And they take over the watch, and they see nothing. They hear nothing. Until near dawn. The sun is almost about to break over the horizon, through the trees and over the great northern sea. It's almost about to break the horizon when suddenly, I believe it's Fleetwood, begins to hear a rustling around them, and the trees begin to sway in the firelight. And he wakes up all of his companions. Get up, get up, get up, get up, get up, get up. Of course, by the time they wake up, it's settled, and they look, and they look, and they look. The path is back where it started. This freaks them out again. They all figure, it's close enough to dawn, let's just stay awake in case, weapons out. Let's have breakfast, spear some of those fish and cook them on their swords so they've got it in their hand, right? That kind of thing. They're very nervous. They're very freaked out. I'm laughing because I've got no idea what this is. I have no idea. Why did the path move? I don't know. Just sounded like a good idea at the time. I've got no idea why it moved. I've got no idea what's happening, but I'm filing it away, so maybe someday, right? They wake up, the rest of the day is fine. Like the rest of the morning, nothing happens. There's nothing uncanny. It's just this perfectly circular clearing with uncovered grass, right? While snow is falling everywhere else. Nothing else. They eat their breakfast, right? They memorize spells and get ready to leave. They're very hesitant going down the path. When they start down the path, they're like, is this going to lead to the same place? And it does. It leads them right back to the main path that goes from the caves to the keep. On they go. They arrive at the keep. Again, it's later in the day. It's not quite nightfall because this is about a day and a half journey, although their initial departure being delayed has slowed them down. So it's getting, late day toward the evening as they arrive. Now, they approach the keep. The doors are closed and locked. There's a bar clearly on the inside, and they're wondering, is that the way we left it? Because remember, they came up this way on their way to the caves and on their way up to Hrothgar's eyes. They stopped here once, but they can't remember. Did we leave those doors open or closed? They don't remember how they left them, and frankly, as the DM, I don't remember how they left them at the end of that adventure either. So Fofire once again scales the wall, and climbing walls is nearly automatic for a thief, so she has no problems. She scales the wall, and goes in through one of the ruined towers. You remember there's a guard room under those towers. As she goes through that guard room in the dark, and she's being careful because the doors are locked. She doesn't know there might be someone in here who locked it, and indeed there is. As she goes through that room, she discovers someone sleeping in there. Someone sleeping in there, beginning to stir, someone who might wake up in the evening and sleep during the day. She can't see real well. Again, human, doesn't have any night vision or anything. So she sneaks on out and finds the main door, takes the bar off and opens the door. And she's just telling them, "Be quiet. There's someone in here," when they hear a voice. "Who there? Who there?" Whatever it was has woken up. Weapons out, they are ready. And out from that guard room stumbles a sleepy-headed gnoll. The gnoll who had been drunk up at the caves and whom they had let go. The gnoll stumbles out and says, "Who there?" "Oh." He's shocked and suddenly very much awake. And they look at him and say, "What are you doing here?" "Was sleeping." "What you do here?" And they have a bit of a standoff, and I can see them deciding, should we kill this guy? But, they didn't the first time, and he doesn't seem like he's going to cause them any trouble. So, why are you here? "Safe. Strong place. No get beat up." Looks at them. "Get beat up now?" And they look at each other and say, "No, maybe not." "Are you alone? Are you here alone?" "Alone. Garrick mad. Garrick bad. Garrick try beat up. Come here. Safe here. No Garrick." Okay. So he's running away from Garrick. How many other gnolls are there? Were there other gnolls around? "Gnolls? How many?" "Many." "Well, how many? What's the number?" "Number? What number?" He has no idea what a number is. He has no concept of a number. There's, one, some, many, right? He doesn't know. So, for whatever reason, my middle guy, Touchberry, tries to teach him numbers. We have an extended period where Touchberry is saying 1, 2. Say it with me. 1, 2, 3. But of course he gets above 4 and the gnoll loses track. He just doesn't have the capacity. It doesn't happen. It never happens. Eventually they get out of him that he has fled away from Garrick. He doesn't want anything to do with Garrick anymore because Garrick is mean to him, right? And he's staying here because it's a safe place. And every night he goes out hunting, and every day he comes back and he locks the door and he hides in here and he sleeps, right? So this is what he's been doing. And now they're talking about, what are we going to do with this guy? What are we going to do with this guy? And at one point they ask him, what are you finding to eat? What do you find to eat? Well, he goes hunting, right? And he catches rabbits and other animals out in the forest, right? And he can catch some pretty big things. He's a gnoll. Gnolls are tough. But, and then they ask, well, how about drink? And he gets a smile and he says, "Kobolds make good wine." So that's what he'd been drinking back at the caves. Kobolds make good wine. So just improving this character, suddenly kobolds are the vintners of my world. Why not? Sure, okay. At any rate, eventually they decide that they have to find a place to camp, right? It's getting late. They're tired. This guy is going to be active. He's nocturnal. He's going to be active. And they don't entirely trust him. They're not entirely sure that they'll be safe with him roaming around. So where are they going to bed down? They know that both of the front rooms that have bunks in them, both of those front rooms are accessible from above. The upper tower was destroyed, but there's a staircase that comes down. So they don't feel terribly comfortable there. Then they remember there was a room in the back. When they came here the first time, the gnoll who was leading the group here had as his own private bedchamber. And you might remember, if you have an encyclopedic memory for this, that there was a chest of treasure under the bed in that room. And so they figure, well, we'll try back there. They take some of the bunks out of the front chambers. You're only using one, right? So we'll take some of the others. These are the bunks that the soldiers had made when they were positioned here from Kilmarnock. They take those back to that chamber because it has a locking door. And they still have the key to it. They lock themselves in, and they figure that way they will be secure. And they leave that guy and say, you do whatever you're going to do tonight. You don't attack us. You attack us, and we will kill you. "Oh, no attack, no attack, no attack." That's what he says, at least. And he's as good as his word. He does not try to attack during the night. They do leave someone awake on watch, but no one tries to disturb them. In the morning, they come out and they actually discover that he's been out and doing his thing. He's come back and he's put as much movable furniture as he can find in front of the doorway to that guard room where he's sleeping. He is as afraid of them as they were of him, right? He must be in there sleeping. We won't bother him. We won't bug him. As far as they're concerned, he can sleep in the keep. I mean, who cares, right? One gnoll isn't going to be any trouble. He seems to be afraid of the other gnolls, so fine. They leave him there, and they're going to make their way back down to Honeywood. Now, before they go, they having spent the night in that bedroom, they remember that there had been that treasure chest, and that when they left after the first time, they had left the copper and the silver because it was just too much to carry, and they buried it somewhere in the woods. So they figure, hey, let's go dig up that copper and silver, right? It hadn't been worth much to carry, but we might as well now, because they were disappointed at the Knoll Cave that all gold and silver and whatnot was taken. We'll get something out of this. They go to the woods, and they dig up that chest of treasure. Now, they have bags to take it back in, and they figure at first, we will just load up the silver to start with. And then if we have enough room and if we can carry it, we'll load up the copper because it's not worth much, right? So they're loading up the silver, and they fill the available portions in their backpacks, which, remember, they have less food now, so there is a bit of room. They fill up the backpacks, they fill up any sacks they're carrying, etc. And then they remember, oh, we've got that bag that those goblins, on their way up to the Kobold Caves the first time, on their way up here, they had met some goblins and fought them and killed them. And then there had been this bag, right? And it had the book with the history of radishes, and it had women's gloves, and it had a comb and things like that. Just odds and ends that the goblins had. So I said, well, we'll fill that up with as much treasure as we can. So they're throwing coins in there. And I say, you're filling it up. And around the table, they're starting to discuss, well, we got to get back. We've got still have a day and a half journey here. If we push it, we might be able to get there late in the evening. We might be able to get late at night. We'll arrive in Honeywood. And they're filling it up. And they say, how many coins can we get in? And I say, well, you're still filling it. You're still putting coins in there. And this bag is only, like, what do you mean we're still filling it? I said, you're still filling it. It's a bag of holding. They had no idea. They had no idea they are carrying a bag of holding with them this entire time. And they've been lugging treasure in this bag and that bag, sticking it in backpacks, etc. No. They could have taken all of the Knoll's treasure the first time, and it wouldn't have been taken by the kobolds. They could have taken it all. So, now they know they've got a bag of holding, and they fill it up with all the copper and all the silver and everything like that. And they prepare for their trip home. On the way where they're going to stay, they're going to camp out at the caves of the kobolds. That was their very first adventure. That little, it was actually turned out to have been the cellars for the mead production, the mead industry that used to be up in this area. They're going to stay there on their way back to Honeywood. So instead of arriving in Honeywood late at night, they actually do arrive there around 11 in the morning, before the midday. And as they approach, they see the palisade and the two new spiffy watchtowers on either side of the gate. They're very impressed with that. And they enter the town. They find the mayor, first of all, teasing him about yelling at someone some days previous. And the mayor's confused about this. Like, what do you... Oh, yeah, I was irked at somebody for doing something. And, there was a story about that. I honestly don't remember what I made up. I made it up in the moment because I had forgotten about the mayor being angry at somebody. And Touchberry, my middle guy, really loved that story. And he really wanted to know, what were you angry about? Why were you yelling at that guy? And so I had to come up with something on the fly. So anyway, I told him about that. And they say, we've got something we need to tell you. We have got to talk. We have got to talk, and we should have Sir Trevor, and we should have, Parson Supple. We should have everybody. Let's get together. So they gather the sort of leading, adventuring citizens of the town. Sulex and Rupert is there, foggy and confused about why he's been invited to this very strange party. But there he is anyway. And they begin to talk. And they tell them, there is a dragon north of the Great Northern Sea. The goblins have been displaced, and they're on the move. We've met a couple of patrols of them. And worse, there are werewolves. Werewolves that seem to have a leader and an organization. And we killed a good number, but we don't know how many others there are. Honeywood might be in danger in the coming days. And could we borrow a boat? Because Fofire is likely suffering lycanthropy. The mayor is shocked, like, what, you've got lycanthropy, and they begin to sort of distance themselves, like, is it catching, right? Well, no, not until she turns into a werewolf and eats your face, eats your face. All right, well, the boats, there won't be a boat back in until tomorrow, late in the day tomorrow. The boat that went down to take our normal sort of, ale run down to Kilmarnock will be back, if you want to go on that one. Of course, that depends on it arriving back, because it's been a dangerous time recently. I don't know if you know, the lizard men are going crazy down there. So, okay, we'll wait till then, and we'll take the boat. The last part of that session, I say you're heading back to the church, because they're those old monastic cells where they're living now. And Fofire, you just begin feeling unsettled and anxious and hungry. You're so hungry, you want meat. The lycanthropy is beginning to take hold. They don't have much time.